translating Trump's latest tariffs as the frontrunners court vote-rich Ontario. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
The top news stories
and conversations that matter to you.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
From the Ontario suburbs to the Paris of the prairies. At the midway point of this federal election campaign, the Liberals and the Conservatives are trying to woo voters in vote-rich Ontario, while the NDP is trying to get off the mat and gain some momentum in Saskatoon. The Conservatives up first today with Pierre Poilievre making an announcement in Milton. That was a Liberal riding held by former Olympian Adam Van Couverden. He'd been the NP there since 2019. Before that, it was represented by Conservative MP and Cabinet Minister Lisa Raitt. This time around, the parties will contest two ridings in the Milton area after the boundaries were redrawn. Poilievre was there to make an announcement about bringing housing costs down, but he also slipped in some remarks about yesterday's tariff news from Donald Trump. Poilievre called Trump's actions toward Canada historic mistreatment.
I condemn President Trump for keeping the tariffs on Canada, all while he offered a 90-day pause on tariffs for dozens of other countries. It remains a mystery why the president treats Canada worse than dozens of other faraway countries who are not America's best friend.
Poilievre also questioned Mark Carney's approach to dealing with the Trump tariffs.
There are more tariffs, American tariffs, on Canada today than there were when Prime Minister Carney took office, while dozens of other countries have secured pauses. Now, I'm not blaming Mr. Carney for the fact that there are even more American tariffs on Canada now than there were when he took office, or for the fact that other countries got a pause in tariffs while he failed to secure one here in Canada. We will all work to end the tariffs on day one after the next election, regardless of who wins. But that's why the fact is that Mark Carney and no one else controls Donald Trump. That's why Carney's biggest election promise and distraction are empty.
While the Poilievre campaign was in Milton, the Carney campaign was a quick drive on Highway 407 in Brampton. Carney also addressed the Trump tariff situation and announced that after his campaign events today, he'll go back to Ottawa and meet with members of his cabinet.
In Canada, there are tariffs that remain in place. Those tariffs are threatening our families, our workers, and our businesses. And while they have been imposed under different pretenses, they all are unjustified, unwarranted, and misguided. So we've been responding, and we are responding with purpose and force. We will fight, we will protect, and we will build.
Gun control was actually the main topic of today's Carney campaign event. Carney was introduced at the event by Natalie Provost, a survivor of the mass shooting at École Polytechnique in 1989. She's running for the Liberal Party. Mark Carney caused a stir earlier in the campaign because he didn't know her name and thought that mass shooting happened at Concordia University. Today, Carney accused Poilievre of wanting to import American-style gun laws into Canada.
You can't be serious about being tough on crime if you're not willing to be tough on guns. You can't be serious about stopping intimate partner violence without being serious about gun control. When we know from our own tragic history how often guns are involved. We are taking action, all while respecting the long-standing traditions of hunting and sports shooting and respecting the traditions of Indigenous peoples. If elected, my government will automatically revoke gun licenses for individuals convicted of violence offenses, including intimate partner violence. We will strengthen firearms licensing and the so-called yellow and red flag laws that keep weapons out of the hands of those who are a risk to themselves or others. We will invest in the RCMP's National Forensic Laboratories in Ottawa and Surrey and the Saskatchewan Ballistics Lab to increase our capacity to track down guns used in crimes. we will quickly, and I mean quickly, reinvigorate the buyback of assault-style firearms and leave the classification of new firearm models to the RCMP, to the experts, not to the gun industry.
Meantime, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is spending another day in Saskatoon. The party had a modest-sized rally last night in that city, during which Singh went on the attack against both Poilievre and Carney.
That people are taking a hard look at Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, and they're saying that. They're saying boo. But they're seriously looking at his plan to cut the things that people need. His plans to cut healthcare, to cut pensions. And they're saying, that's not good for me. That's not good for my family. That's not good for our country. More and more Canadians are rejecting Pierre Poilievre, and that's a good thing. I'm happy with it. And now people are taking a look at Mark Carney, and they're saying, you know what? Mark Carney is also talking a lot about cuts. He's talking about cutting services for people to give tax cuts to millionaires. That's not what we need right now.
Not much change in any of the latest polls. A new liaison poll says it's a 3-point lead for the Liberals over the Conservatives. The latest Nanos tracking poll shows the Liberals ahead of the Conservatives by 5 points. Of note, Abacus data with a poll yesterday. It says the Liberals have opened up a 6-point lead over the Conservatives. Just 3 days ago, Abacus data said the two parties were tied. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
Well, he's my friend on the right side of things. Michael Taube is back with us. He's a syndicated columnist and speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Good day to you.
Hey, Rob. How are you doing today?
Just very good. Very good. Good to hear from you. The news is the news today. We're going to talk about the news media and the Conservative campaign's approach to the news media, because the Conservative campaign, Pierre Poilievre, being widely lampooned for the way they treat the media. They don't let the media travel with the campaign. They limit questions to handpicked journalists. There are no follow-up questions allowed, 4 questions max. What do you think about this as a strategy? What's going on here?
It's not terribly unique. I know that everyone likes to say that, this is the first time they've ever heard of it and feign shock and horror, which they love to do. But this has unfortunately become very common. And it's not just something that's attributed to conservative parties and conservative leaders. It's also happened with parties of the left, too. We saw limitations, for example, when Joe Biden was president, the former Democratic president. There were limitations in terms of how many questions could be asked, who from, where from, etc. I'm not going to say I'm going to sit here and defend the way it works and the way it happens. I mean, politicians and political parties and leaders should be transparent by nature, and we know that. The problem is that as time has gone along, I think it's probably fair to say that a lot of reporters' questions, which some of them were puffed ones and others were obviously more concentrated, but they become more politicized to the point that there's just unfortunately a lack of faith and good faith and relations between the media and politics in general. And it's created a very big wall, which is unfortunate, but it's part of reality. And people keep saying, well, there must be some hope in turning it back and things are going to change. And this is just, it's because of X leader or Y party or Z issue and everything will be better. I think that unfortunately, and I'm not defending it, what Pierre Poilievre is doing obviously may not be nice to some people's ears and they may not like the limitations. But again, you have to also look in the mirror as well. And, Mark Carney, the current prime minister, has certainly not been overloaded with media sources and questions. And any time he has questions, he handles them terribly. I mean, as bad as anyone I've ever seen. So it's not unique. I'm not saying that what is happening with the Conservative campaign is necessarily right, but it's part and parcel with what we've seen for a long time, including my old friend and boss, Stephen Harper. It goes back a long way.
I think in conservative circles, there's a mistrust of the news media. That the news media is, especially the press gallery, has an inherent liberal bias.
Yeah.
What fuels the mistrust in the conservative movement for the news media?
Well, look, what you explain, whether people like it or not, it certainly does exist. Most reporters historically, let's just use our country as an example, have typically been left of center or liberal, if you like. That's the way it's been. But the questions at one point, and you can see it through questions to prime ministers in Canada, presidents of the United States, or whoever world leader, or whichever world leader you want to pick, you can just see that the questions and the tensions between the two sides have really grown a lot stronger. And yes, conservatives don't trust the media like they used to. But in fairness, if you look around, I don't find parties of the left, the Liberals, the NDP, the Greens, etc., I don't find they trust the media much more, in spite of what they suggest or say or claim that they're handling things differently than the conservatives are. I mean, everyone's basically at fault to some extent, Rob. I'm not going to deny that.
Right.
To actually just point fingers and say Poilievre is the only reason for this, I'm sorry, it's not even close to that.
Okay. Well, I mean, the thing that's kind of constantly following Poilievre around is either he's not tough enough on Trump or he sounds like Trump.
Right.
And some people will say, well, the way he treats the media is very Trumpy. It's Trumpy. The media is the enemy. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, do you see that?
No, I don't.
No?
I mean, the comparison to Trump, I mean, I've disproven that so many times in columns that the two men are just not the same. I mean, yes, they do.
But their disdain for the mainstream media, surely they have that in common.
Yeah.
Do they have that in common?
But you're isolating it to one leader. I don't think there's an enormous amount of trust from liberals with the media, the NDP with the media, the Greens with the media. And the reason is very simple, because the press coverage they're receiving on the left, it tends to be more favorable, but it's not perfect. And on the right, I mean, if you study it long enough and go back many years, it's been far from perfect, very imperfect overall. So, but I don't agree with the comparison that Poilievre to Trump, and it's very Trumpy. And then people talking about, oh, look, he's talking about the size of his, huge audience in Edmonton, which ranged between 10 to 15,000 people. That's what Trump always says. Everything isn't about Donald Trump, ladies and gentlemen. I know that's hard to believe, but there are other leaders and models that we use in the world. It's not just Trump. And no, the two men are not the same at all. It's not there.
All right. Mark Carney, we'll play this for you when we come back. I don't know if you've heard this yet. I mean, Carney did his own sparring with the news media today. We'll let you hear some of that. I'd love your reaction to it. When we return, back with syndicated columnist Michael Taube with us every Thursday here on Now You Know. We've been talking about politicians and their relationship, rocky sometimes, with the ink-stained wretches of the news media. That's such a great old ink-stained wretches. I always like that one. Bob Fife and Steve Chase in the Globe and Mail have a story today. People may remember the Liberals had to drop a candidate who advocated for turning over his political rival to the Chinese consulate in Toronto in order so people could collect a bounty. So they've replaced that candidate, according to the Globe and Mail, with someone who is a member of a Beijing-friendly, quote, lobby organization, has given talks at events honoring a Toronto group that advocates for the annexation of Taiwan by China. So the theme of the story is you've swapped out one pro-Beijing candidate for another. And he was asked about this today by a journalist from the Globe and Mail. Let's hear how Mark Carney handled this.
Is the party okay with the fact that Liberal candidate Peter Yan has been so close with the Chinese consulate and China-friendly groups, given the public inquiry into foreign interference, says that this is a tactic China uses to exert influence?
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, but you can't believe everything you read in the Globe and Mail. So in your question, and I guess in the article in question, you said I had a meeting with whatever your term was, Beijing group. I've never heard of this group. Okay. Never heard of this group. Certainly didn't have a set-up meeting with this group. Full stop. So check your sources before you write things like that. Okay?
Check your sources before you write something like that. Is that Trumpy? Or
It's more Trumpy than what we were talking about with Polyev. That's for sure. Yeah, that is very much so. And I'm not saying Mark Carney is Donald Trump. He's not either, but that's certainly closer to it. I got to say, I mean, because that voice sounds to me like Laura Stone of the Globe and Mail. She's certainly been in this fair bit the past few days because she was the one who talked crowd.
Yeah, I don't think it's Laura. I don't think it's Laura Stone, but
not
anyway.
Laura? Okay,
No,
sorry, Laura.
yeah.
But whoever it is, that was pretty vicious overall, and that's the thing with Carney. More so than any of the other federal leaders, including Polyev, he just does not handle negative comments being thrown at him or dissent in general. But it was interesting to state that don't believe everything you read in the Globe and Mail. And that's a near replication of his quote. That is an astonishing comment that one of the two main newspapers in the country was lambasted so badly by a liberal prime minister. You would expect it from my side of the aisle.
Well,
right?
it's reminiscent, Mike, if I could just jump in there, when Mr. Trudeau famously came to the microphone on the day that the SNC-Lavalin scandal broke about Jody Wilson-Raybould and said the story in the Globe and Mail is false.
Yeah.
Right? You remember that?
Yeah. It is. You're absolutely right, Rob. It is very similar, but I think the language that Carney uses is far more pointed and more attacking. Trudeau certainly dismissed it. I agree with you, but it was done differently. Again, I mean, this is the whole thing, and this is why the race is getting closer and closer if you believe some polls. And I know there are others that are showing differently, but my sense that it's either margin of error or difference between the two parties, probably with the Liberals slightly ahead, but not by very much, and certainly sinking like a stone in places like Nanos Research and elsewhere. I think what you're looking at here is Mark Carney is obviously frustrated with the fact that everything isn't being rolled out on a red carpet for him. I think that's kind of what he assumed and expected. He figured that Donald Trump and tariffs, which obviously changed the difference between the two political parties when the Conservatives were way out in front, but then moved the Liberals a little bit out ahead, or largely ahead in some polls. He probably thought it was going to be easy pickings at that time, but he's just made mistake after mistake after mistake in so many different ways. The arrogant way, curt manner he handles press conferences, dropping out of a French language debate for TVA, after saying a few hours before that, oh, sure, I'm in. He's also, there's questions about his temper, the volcanic temper that I can honestly say I'm the one who pushed a lot in Canada, and I think it's being used more often. So I'll take credit for that.
Okay.
And a variety of other things. But Carney, it's fine for everyone to say, look how terrible Polyev is. Carney's behavior in front of the mic, in front of the press, would never have been acceptable even a couple of years ago. I mean, look at the last few prime ministers. No one's done it.
All right. We'll have to wrap it up there for this week. We'll see what next week brings in this federal election campaign. We're about halfway there now, Michael. We'll speak soon. Bye-bye.
There'll be more. Take care. Bye.
Yeah. Syndicated columnist, speechwriter. For former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, that's Michael Taube, the Newsday panel. Just ahead.
You have questions.
Now you know with Rob Snow has the answers.
On News Radio, the Newsday panel.
And the gang's all here. Time for our Newsday panel on a Thursday. Alex Creston, Vice President, Crestview Strategies. He's usually in the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, but he has made his way to the nation's capital. How are you?
Very good, very good. Nice to be center adjacent in this fair city today.
Adjacent. Okay. Chris Sims is the Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. But certainly no stranger to Ottawa. She lived here for many years. Former journalist, worked on Parliament Hill. Good friend of mine. Used to work together in Ottawa radio. How are you?
I'm wonderful, Snowman, and I'm actually also in Ottawa for the Vast Right Conspiracy meeting. Yes.
Yeah. So I gather you're both here for the Canada Strong and Free Network Conference. Is that a good guess?
That's
Alex?
right.
Yeah. Spot on. Yeah. Okay. What are you hoping to learn from that? If I could just pick your brain on that, Alex, what comes out of this thing?
The good thing about this conference, where it's different from like a political convention, is that this is really more of the nonpartisan conservative sort of movement coming together and talking about ideas that are not necessarily tied to electoral politics. So why that's interesting is that this can be sort of a good place to discuss and incubate ideas, before that are sort of bubbling, that are important for people at large, that are not necessarily, the on the political agenda.
Right. What do you get out of it, Chris?
Similar sort of stuff. It's where you can really get some great ideas from people and also just kind of get reinvigorated in the movement. Like, for example, Franco Terrazzano, my colleague, he has a new book out today, and it's all about axing the tax, and it's all about the carbon tax. Because as you know, Rob, this didn't just crop up in the last 6 months. Like, people have been fighting this, especially if you count BC. They've been fighting this thing since 2008. And there's lots of people in this conference room, actually, who are super brainy, who keep thinking, we just didn't do the carbon tax right. No, it was a disaster from the start, and this is why. And so you can get those kind of discussions going. And then other things that aren't really CPF wheelhouse, but things like school choice, of like, how much money are you spending on schools for the quality you're getting? Why don't we put that into tailor-made schools for kids at a low price? So really kind of big ideas like that.
Okay, interesting. Okay. And I mean, there'll be a lot of, high-profile speakers. One of the big trade people in the Trump administration is coming. I'm sure there'll be a lot of coverage of that. I think Premier Smith is speaking as well. Won't she be part of?
Yeah, Daniel Smith is speaking this afternoon at around 3:30. We just finished listening to the BC Conservative leader, John Rudstad, of how did he go from, 2 seats to almost becoming premier in like 6 months. So that was pretty interesting as well.
Right. Okay. Well, let's turn our attention to the election campaign. I mean, a big news story today is the news media writing about the news media and how the news media feels mistreated by the Conservative Party's campaign. No one following the leader on the bus, handpicked journalists asking questions, no follow-up questions allowed. Alex, what do you think of this as a strategy, first of all?
Look, I think that this is sort of the way you framed it is just about right. This is a kind of a thing that is, maybe a little bit of inside baseball and a little bit academic. I don't think that the average person who's deciding how to vote cares about how press conferences are managed, and I don't think that taking up space on the newspaper broadsheet is really grabbing anyone's attention when this doesn't tell people how they're going to put food on the table or a roof over their house. These are sort of really just very inside baseball.
Inside baseball. What do you think, Chris?
Well, I was a longtime creature of this habitat in Ottawa. I often refer to it as a terrarium. And I think there is some truth in that we can kind of get, we've got recycled oxygen in here. And so we start making ourselves the story as journalists. However, the election is the time to get on the record and try to reach normal people with exactly what you were just raising there about issues like affordability, right? Yeah. Are we going to have a ban on gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles coming soon? Would there be a home equity tax? Like, these are serious questions that I think journalists should be asking people, because that's the way that normal people hear quite often from politicians. Okay. So I think there's a good way to structure this, and maybe they do a follow-up question.
Okay. Do you think some of the reporters are not asking the right questions, Chris? Is that what
Yeah. So it's one of those things where I'll just give you an example. Like, for example, if Pierre Poilievre has already answered the question on why aren't you getting a security clearance like 18 times, then maybe move on to something else that someone in, say, Langley or Surrey or, Mississauga cares about, because you know what he's going to say anyway. You don't need to agree with what he's saying, but you are already anticipating what that clip's going to be. Everybody in the newsroom knows it. So I would really, really hope that people move on to affordability, because, Rob, I'm sure you get phone calls all the time. 50% of Canadians are broke. They're within $200 every month of not being able to make the minimum payments on their bills. Like, it is a shocking number. And so I'm hearing a lot of angst and anguish coming from people.
But again, and I just talked about this with Michael Taube, and I'd like your thoughts on it. I mean, Trump looms large, and people don't want anything associated with Trump. People don't want any Trump stench on them. And if Poilievre is seen as disdainful to the media, that might come across as Trumpian or Trumpy. And people are not going to like that. It'll be a turnoff for people. Alex, what do you think?
You could tell that same story about Mark Carney, who seems to be very irritated by the questions he takes from the media. If maybe that's a trend across politics, right? Like like there's been a bunch of points where he's scolded or taken reporters to task for the.
Well, there was one today. Yeah, there was one today. Okay. All right, we'll be right back. It's our Newsday panel. I'm Rob Snow. Alex Creston is vice president with Crestview Strategy, and Chris Sims is the Alberta director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. They're both in Ottawa today. I must ask you, let's start with you. Chris Sims instantly thought about you today, whether your head exploded, whether what you think about a recent poll that says a majority of Canadians are giving Mark Carney the credit for canceling the carbon tax. Now, this was in a poll done by Abacus Data. It was done for the Toronto Star, and this is the write-up in the Toronto Star. Susan Delacourt writes, new polling from Abacus Data shows that Liberal leader Mark Carney, not Poilievre, is getting credit for axing the carbon levy by a margin of nearly 2-1. A full 55% of respondents said the latest Abacus poll cited Carney as the leader who should get the credit for doing away with the price on carbon on April 1st, compared to just 28% who said Poilievre brought about this goal for pushing for it. Quote, this data will make some conservatives' heads explode, said the CEO of Abacus Data, David Coletto. How's your head, Chris?
I was fortunately wearing a very large hat at the time I read that, so it managed to contain it. There wasn't as much goo. But really, it is pretty frustrating, I will say, because, of course, the Taxpayers Federation has been pushing to scrap the tax all this time. And Pierre Poilievre, to his credit, has been very vocal, very consistently against the carbon tax. I mean, the dude's got T-shirts with Axe the Tax on. But Carney, reading the writing on the wall, seeing how unpopular the consumer-facing carbon tax is, as he puts it, reduced it to zero. Now, for us political nerds, we know what that means. We know the carbon tax law is still on the books and that it can be put back up as far as they want as soon as they reconvene Parliament. But for the average person who's not, drinking this in every day, all they're seeing is, thankfully, a 20 cent per liter drop in their price of gas for the most part, like across the country, except for the poor folks in Quebec. I can understand. Well, people will know, oh yeah, that Mark Carney guy's prime minister. Oh wow, look, the price of gas is down. So I don't really blame them for answering the pollster and giving him the credit. But we all know this was not his fight. And to be very clear, Mark Carney loves carbon taxes. Like, people should read his book. It's 507 pages, and carbon taxes are a keystone to that man's worldview.
Yeah. What do you think about this poll? Most people are giving Mark Carney the credit for canceling the carbon tax. Alex, what do you think about that?
I think that the reversal is so stark that it caught people's attention. So when to see a new Liberal leader come in and reverse what was a key pillar of the government's mandate and agenda, it was such a shocking thing. It caught people's attention and was a sticky enough idea. It was a big enough reversal that it was sticky in people's minds, and the Liberals are benefiting from that, regardless of if it appears to be hypocritical or maybe not. There maybe people question how committed they are to it. It was such a stark reversal that it does really stand out.
Well, even the other day, Mark Carney said at his rally, the carbon tax is good on paper. It's not that he has stopped believing in the carbon tax. He said the carbon tax is good on paper, but it had become too divisive. That's why he canceled it. It's not because he doesn't believe in carbon taxes. And I guess my question would be, do you think the carbon tax would have been axed by Mark Carney or anyone else if Pierre Poilievre hadn't been campaigning on it for the last 2 years? Chris?
No, I don't think so, Rob. You really hit the nail on the head there. And even Mark Carney's language. Remember when he was running for leader and then first campaigning, when he said, we're not going to axe the tax in Kelowna, BC, that was a laugh line. Like, people started laughing and he laughed along with them, as if the very notion of axing the tax is absurd and kind of, beneath him, right? Like, that's something peasants talk about because it fits on a bumper sticker. He said he's going to change the carbon tax. That's a key difference. And he said he wants to create a new big industrial carbon tax. And this is what blew me away, Rob. I'm sure you noticed too. The industrial carbon tax has spooked working people so much that trade unions are endorsing the Conservatives because of this. Like, I can't remember the last time I saw pipe workers and Boilermakers endorsing the Blue Party. And it's because of the industrial carbon tax. And this is something I wanted to flag with you because I missed the last time you spoke with Ian Lee. Carney also announced when he was running for leader carbon tariffs. He calls them border adjustments.
Yeah, a border adjustment mechanism. Yeah.
And we've heard nothing about how much those are going to cost. I've heard nothing else since.
Or whether that's still the plan. It was. You're right, Chris. It was part of his platform. It was in the literature when he was running for the leadership of the Liberal Party. Look, we have to stop here because we're a little tight on time. I do want to get your thought on the people who think the polls are missing something because of the rallies and other reasons. Signs, people they talk to at work, whatever the case might be. People think there's something amiss with the polls. It's a lot of people who think the polls are wrong. That they look at the rallies for Pierre Poilievre and say it doesn't line up with what the polls are saying, or the signs on their street, or the conversations they have with family, friends. I'm going to be asking about this on Talkback today, coming up. What do you think about the polls and the rally sizes, Chris? Is there a disconnect there, or what do you think?
Well, objectively speaking, I'd say I am surprised by the size of the rallies. Been in the game for a long time, and I'm seeing an emotional connection being made with the Conservative leader for the first time ever. Like, I don't know if you remember, Rob, I don't remember people yelling, "I love you" at Stephen Harper during rallies. I just don't. And so you are seeing a big surge of attendance. However, when it comes to picking polling and the populations, I don't know, man, because older generations are the ones who answer their phones typically. Younger generations don't. But it's also the older generations who are bigger than Gen X and younger. I think they're about a quarter bigger than you and I in Gen X. So, and they vote. So I don't know.
Don't know. Okay. What about you, Alex? People think there's a disconnect, that the polls maybe aren't accurate. Something's not adding up for people. What do you think?
I think regardless of whether the polls are accurate or not, I think what the rallies and the excitement that people are seeing, and the reason why they're feeling that way is because those people are very motivated. So if that's a gauge of something useful, other than wow, that's a lot of people, that is a sizable population of people who are extremely motivated, and maybe aren't usually motivated. So does that grow the electorate in a way that we're not used to? Canadian polling polls all voters, right? Not, like in the United States, registered voters or, not always likely voters. So the question is, who is going to be more motivated and make sure they get out there to vote? Older Canadians tend to be very reliable voters. But
very reliable,
we are seeing this real, legitimate movement in a way that no one's ever seen before, with tens of thousands of people coming out. That really it's going to be an experiment. Are these people going to be motivated? Are they going to vote? Are there enough of them? And what does it mean to those people if the election doesn't go their way? And how are they going to feel about that, especially if they're not used to being engaged politically? there's going to be a lot of a lot of people who are experiencing loss in a very personal way. If the election doesn't go their way.
Especially, and Chris would know this better than maybe you and me, especially west of Manitoba, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you can feel it the moment you walk out the door, Rob. People are really on knife's edge right now with this, waiting on this election out west. Yep.
Okay. Hey, enjoy the conference. Enjoy our fair city. And we'll speak to you
Rob.
soon. Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye, Suman.
That's, Alex Creston, usually at a Toronto Crestview Strategy there, Vice President, and the Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, who calls Lethbridge home. That's Chris Sims. I'm Rob Snow. Talkback. Coming up next, a couple of things in the mix for you to ponder and then give us a call. Love to hear from you today. Here on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. Today, we're going to throw out a couple of topics, find out what you have to say about them at 1-833-668-2577. One of them is the polls, and the other is Donald Trump and the markets and what you think might be going on there. So on the polls, all the polls, and I mean all of the polls, are showing that halfway through this election campaign, it's the Liberals in the lead. The Conservatives are in second place. Some of the polls say not too far behind. Some of the polls say very far behind. And all the polls say the NDP's in bad shape, like really bad shape. And we've heard it over the last few weeks on this show from many callers to talk back. Some people just don't buy it and don't believe that the Liberals are in the lead at the midway point of this election campaign. It just doesn't add up, doesn't compute for a lot of people. For all kinds of reasons. Some people think, why? Well, and I can appreciate this, that they're asking, well, what would make Canadians ever consider voting for the Liberals again after the last 9 years? Some people have called us and have suggested the polls are somehow fixed or rigged to favor the Liberals. Some people have called and they have said, well, look at the sizes of the crowds turning out to see Pierre Poilievre at a rally, no matter where he goes, all across the country, from Surrey, British Columbia to Borden, Carleton, Prince Edward Island, wherever he goes. Thousands of people are showing up to hear his pitch, and yet the polls say he's losing. Or people call and say, look, everyone I talk to, everyone I know, everyone I work with, none of them are voting for the Liberals. None of them are voting for the Liberals. They all say they're going to vote for the Conservatives, and they can't understand how these polls can be showing what they're showing. What do you think? What do you think about this? At the Poilievre rally in Brampton last night, there were people wearing hoodies and ball caps that said, do you believe the polls? So obviously, they don't believe the polls. What about you? What do you make of all this talk about the polls that have the Liberals in the lead, all of them? What do you think of all of this talk that the polls must be missing something? I would say this never seemed to be an issue when the Conservatives were ahead by 20 points. Now it's an issue. But share your thoughts, please. I'd like to know what you think of all of this. It's something new for me. I mean, this is my... in the news business, my 7th or 8th federal election that I've covered. I've never really confronted this before, people expressing so much doubt in the polls. I've certainly heard politicians, they all say the only poll that matters is the poll on election day. They all say that. That's a standard answer. I get that. But phone lines are open now, 1-833-668-2577. Maybe that turns out to be the main topic of the day, but we do want to throw another one out there for you. What do you think is going on with the stock market? What do you think is going on with the stock market? For the better part of a week, the stock market was getting beaten up, battered, bruised because of the Liberation Day tariff news from Donald Trump. Markets in the tank. They're in the tank again today. Then yesterday morning, Trump posts on social media, "This is a great time to buy." And then a few hours later, he makes this post about tariffs, raising tariffs on China, lowering the reciprocal tariffs on a whole bunch of other countries, and the stock market goes to the stratosphere. Like one of the biggest one-day rallies in the history of Wall Street. So some people are wondering what's really going on here with this stock market. And if you have any thoughts on that, we want to run that by you too. What do you think is really going on? Is this really about trade and tariffs, or is this about trading of another kind, like the insider kind? Democrats in the United States demanding an investigation, want to know if people were tipped off. I mean, it seems like Trump was tipping everybody off with that social media post. Great time to buy. I've seen people on social media say it's one big pump and dump scheme. So insiders in Washington can make out like bandits because they know what's going to happen before it happens. I don't know. I'd love to know what you think. I mean, there's another line of thinking that Trump blinked, he caved because he had no choice, because markets were in such a state of disarray. We were at risk of having another financial crisis. So he had to cave in and do this and then try to spin it as a win. I'm no stock market expert. I've covered the markets for a long time, but I wouldn't consider myself any kind of expert on the stock market. But if you have any thoughts on what is going on with these stock markets, we'd sure love to hear your thoughts on that. I think that's more than enough to get us started for the day. If you've never called before, just mention that to David. He's screening our calls, and he'll make your call a priority. Hayden in Calgary. Hi, first-time caller, Hayden. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, great to hear from you.
My thoughts are about the polls. And
yes.
I can't help, Rob, but going back to the last election here in the States. I know they're different countries,
Sure.
but I do remember quite clearly that the media really had it down for the other party. And I think it was a unpleasant surprise when the results came. I mean, from at least my observation, So I mean, I'm right here in Calgary, and Pierre was here over 15,000. I mean, 15,000. I think that must count for something, Rob.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, do you think you think there might be a disconnect then, right?
I really do believe. I really do believe. At least what I'm sensing so far. It could very well be a surprise in this election, I believe.
What about people you talk? I mean, you're in Calgary. I mean, it's conservatives are pretty strong in Calgary, obviously, but I mean, we're told about liberal momentum and all of this stuff. I mean, is that your impression in the conversations you're having with people people in your social circle, whatever the case might be?
No, not that. And even though I know this is conservative country, but I still do not get that feeling at all. And not only about a feeling, just a sense, and also my conversations with people.
Yeah.
I happen to be relatively a public figure, and I'm just not getting that feeling at all.
You're not getting that vibe. Okay. All right.
No,
very interesting.
No.
All right, Hayden. Hope to hear from you again as we continue to do Talkback. Don't be a stranger. We'll move along though to Halifax, Nova Scotia. Hello, Dave. You're on the air, Dave.
Yes. Hello.
Hi,
Rob,
Dave.
Thank you for taking my call.
My pleasure.
Couple great topics. I guess I'm going to stick to one, and that is the election we have ongoing here. I don't think I'm going to echo your last caller. I have 3 sons that are in their 30s, 2 of which just recently bought homes in Nova Scotia and paid a pretty price for them, and they know what it's like out there. Just trying to make they fortunately got half decent jobs, but you never know. Wives as well, but the price of real estate, the way things have gone up in this country and have been managed as far as the government goes, I think it's left a very bad scar on the Liberals. They've had a chance to turn this country around. And I think if you look at BC, for example, which is generally an NDP, they came within a hair of losing BC to the Conservatives, which is an amazing thing in itself because Conservatives in BC are generally not even in the running. We have Tim Houston here, the Premier, who is just got a poll, that approved his rating of 53%. People are happy with his leadership here.
Yes.
And I think you've got...
but like I'm looking at the map here. I'm looking at a pollster's map here of the country. And it has the Liberals winning all the seats in Newfoundland, all the seats in PEI, 9 of the 11 seats in Nova Scotia, and 7 of the 10 seats in New Brunswick. Like, not a clean sweep for the Liberals, but like a pretty, like it's a lot of red.
Yeah, I think we've been scarred by the Liberals, and I think people are going to see through this. I think, of course, the last half of this a little brief period of time for making up whoever's going to win this thing. But I think it's very similar to down south with Trump when he was down 3-4% in many of the states. He won all the battleground states there. He won the popularity, which I wouldn't have thought, but I could have put money on that he was going to win. You could just see the way the other party was wavering and just didn't have it. And he got huge crowds. Poilievre, I've never seen the likes of this with any prime minister. Can you remember seeing these large crowds for anybody at all?
Well, not in my lifetime. No, not in my lifetime.
Not in my lifetime. No, in my lifetime as well. So I also have a young son.
But I just wonder, I just wonder,
anyway,
does it translate into votes on election night? That's the thing.
I think it will.
Or are these people who are going to these rallies, are they people who are already going to vote for the Conservatives anyway?
Well, why would you be there if you weren't? I mean, that makes sense, but there's a lot.
Well, I just wonder if they're going, maybe are people going to check it out and maybe be persuaded that they could support the Conservatives?
I hope.
Are they really growing? They have to grow, right?
I would certainly think that's the case. It's not a lot of fun sitting outside waiting in the cold and waiting. It is. There's large crowds. So,
right.
Yeah, and by the way, I will add, I have one son who lives in Vancouver right now, where I was living myself at one time, and he sees the light. He just says, I cannot vote for the Liberals. What I see here in Vancouver under the NDP, the way it has gone, and I don't talk to my sons. I tell them, here's what I do, Rob. You have to do some research on your own. Don't listen to your old man. Okay. Who's going to benefit you the most? Okay. Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Dave. Good to hear from you again. Okay. We'll stop here and pick things up. Scott is in Ontario. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Rob. How are you?
I'm good, Scott. Now, Ontario is a pretty big place. Takes a few days to drive across it. Whereabouts in Ontario are you calling from?
Southwestern Ontario.
Southwestern Ontario. Okay. All right.
Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, I love listening to your show. A lot of conservatives call in. So, but as a liberal, as a voting liberal in Ontario, as a centrist, I like listening to your show. I like listening to what conservatives have to say. So, but unfortunately, against your first two callers. No, Rob, the polls were correct when Pierre Poilievre had a 25-point lead. There was nothing wrong with the polls at that point. It was a disaster for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, and everybody knew it. And now, all of a sudden, the same pollsters are absolutely incorrect, which listening to people call in is hilarious. I think what people fail to, Rob, to understand is that the angst and Pierre Poilievre, and I'm going to blame him for it, and his handlers, that everything was Justin Trudeau's fault. Everything.
Okay.
Just inflation, just in everything. And with Justin gone, and with the onset of Mark Carney, it's like, okay, it's a whole new game. And there's only one in Ontario around me. I don't know anybody who's voting for Pierre Poilievre in my personal life. I really don't. I can honestly say it. I know your other colleagues have said the same thing out west. Okay. In Alberta, I'm sure that's the way it is.
Were they saying that in November? Were they saying that? Let me ask you, Scott. Yeah. Were they saying that in November when Justin Trudeau was still leading the Liberals? Were they saying at that point, I'm not voting for Pierre Poilievre? Or were they willing to consider voting for Pierre Poilievre at that time?
No, I don't think they would be. Well, I don't think a lot of people were talking about actually voting because we weren't actually, the writ hadn't been dropped, even though Pierre's been he's been in election mode for 2 years. But the writ wasn't dropped. But what I will say is that I and a lot of people I know and talk to thought that the Liberals would end up fourth in the upcoming election. They thought it would be, Pierre Poilievre, probably maybe even the Bloc as being the official opposition, NDP, and maybe the Liberals even lost party status. That was 6 months ago, Rob. That was a possibility, and I think people like myself and other people thought, well, that's a possibility. But the game has changed, and I think for Conservatives, what they haven't been able to sort of acknowledge and accept is that the game has changed, and they're still thinking, oh, this is Pierre Poilievre against Justin Trudeau and Justin Trudeau's Liberals. It's not. It's Mark Carney.
Right.
The game has changed, and for centrists like myself who have voted Liberal and who were thrilled that the party went to the left, weren't thrilled about that, are now energized. And I think there's when you look at the polls, Rob, and you look at who has jumped to the Liberals, I think 29% of people who jumped to the Liberals, this is the pollster saying it, not me, are Conservatives, people in the center that thought, it's like, hey, I voted for Doug Ford in Ontario, so I can vote Conservative, but I can't vote for a far right party that's going to run the country like Donald Trump. And you talk about, this is the funny thing. Your first two callers talked about the
I wouldn't describe Poilievre as far right, but if you want to, that's fine. Yeah.
Well, no, but he's allowed the party to take him far right. I mean, the Conservative Party today is not the Conservative Party of my dad. That's not. There was a joining of some far right people into the party, and it looks like it sometimes for people in the center like me, it looks like they've taken over. But the rallies, who talked about the rallies? When you talk about rallies and rally sizes, I think
it sounds like Trump. It sounds like Trump, right?
Like Trump, and and I'm telling you, people in Ontario do not want anything that resembles Trump. Nothing and so you start talking about rallies and rally sizes. Oh, that's Donald Trump. Don't want anything to do with him.
Gotcha. Interesting. Thank you, Scott. Interesting points. So most of the people want to talk about the polls today here on Talkback. I can mainline the polls. I'm kind of a poll addict, I guess you could say, political poll addict. This is what the latest polls are saying. Just let me run these down for you very quickly. Okay, Nanos tracking poll, Liberals 43, Conservatives 38, NDP at 9, so a 5-point lead there. Liaison strategies, Liberals 43, Conservatives 40, so a 3-point lead, NDP at 8. Main Street research, Keto Maggie, the pollster there, Liberals 44, Conservatives 37. NDP at 5. Oh my gosh. Abacus, I found this interesting because just 3 days ago, Abacus said it's all tied up 39-39. And 3 days later, not tied up anymore. Liberals by 6. Liberals 42, Conservatives 36, NDP 11. Research Co. Liberals 44, Conservatives 36, NDP 8. So those are the top line numbers. National snapshot right now. Polls came up during campaign events today. In Milton, Ontario, Pierre Poilievre was asked about the polls today. Let's listen to this.
We've met people at your rallies who don't believe the polls. Do you believe the polls, and can you commit today that you will respect the results of the election no matter the outcome?
Yes, and that decision will be based on whether, after a lost Liberal decade of rising crime and costs and a falling economy under America's thumb, we can afford a fourth Liberal term, or whether we want change with a new Conservative government that will axe taxes, build homes, stop crime, unleash our resources.
So he never, he said he would respect the outcome of the election. He never really did talk about the polls. They put the same kind of question to Mark Carney today, just kind of down the road in Brampton.
People at Conservative rallies say they don't necessarily believe national polls. Earlier this morning, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre would not say if he believed them. My question to you, do you believe the polls right now? And do you commit to recognizing the result of the election, whatever it is?
Jeez, of course. Okay. This is Canada. I know there's certain parties that just import all their slogans and their policies from America. But let's not import that nonsense into Canada. We will have, and we are in the midst of a fair and open and free election in Canada. I am very pleased about the very high level of engagement of Canadians across this country in this election process, being informed, coming out to rallies, knocking on doors, making phone calls.
Right. So anyway, not a single poll says the Conservatives in their lead at halftime. If you're a Conservative supporter, I don't know what to tell you. Like, it is what it is. Ernie in Kitchener. Hi, Ernie.
Hey, Rob.
Hi, Ernie.
Oh, there you are. Okay, so as far as the polls, or quickly, as far as the last caller, it's the same baseball team. They just changed pitchers. But anyways, we'll go to polling.
Yeah.
Just like you've brought it up recently about the social media influence and that stuff. So I was doing this weeks ago, and I've been watching both rallies. So I'm probably too far into it. I shouldn't be. My wife tells me I need to relax, take a break, which I agree with. But just comments like, and these are like, this is not polling, but just numbers on YouTube, on CPAC. Like Mark Carney's biggest rally was 22,000 views on YouTube on CPAC. Like Pierre's biggest one obviously was the Edmonton one. I'm not going to bring that number up, but he's averaging double views on CPAC at his rally, and so almost tripling the views that he has there. Okay, and then let's bring up the influencers here. There's influencers that are getting 100 to 200,000 views at Pierre's rallies, and I'm trying to find if there's a Liberal guy that follows him just to see, because I believe in the States everyone was doing the polling, but no one was looking into the young people race, like the podcast, the influencers, those aren't taken into the poll consideration. I'm not saying a huge crowd size is going to win you the election, but the numbers just don't add up here. And I know you just,
you may, I don't know if you're onto something, but it's a question I have also asked as well. This digital ecosystem, of people who aren't watching the 6 o'clock news anymore, or sticking around late at night to watch the National, or are reading whatever the daily newspaper is, reading the Record in Kitchener, Waterloo, or whatever the case might be. They're consuming their information a different way. Does that influence the outcome of the election that can't be measured by polls? Again, I don't know.
Those are the questions I'm asking, and the numbers are just, as you look to the live views and things like that.
Yeah.
They are astronomical, 3 times the size of the Liberal rallies in their viewership. And young people, I hate to say it, but they don't trust the mainstream media. I firmly believe a part of that is they're following these guys, and they're looking to these guys and looking to see what they're saying. Because I couldn't believe Mark Carney had a live rally the same time as Pierre had his in Edmonton, and the viewership, because the cell towers dropped in Alberta when he was doing his rally, there was over 100,000 views on this guy's cell phone, crappy viewership watching Pierre's rally, and Carney in BC was getting I think 22,000 views. That's where I'm questioning things.
Okay.
I'm not going to say the polls are fake.
Right.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thank you. Let's go to Eric is in Halifax. Eric.
Hey, how you doing today, Rob?
Good, Eric. How are you?
I got pneumonia.
Oh, no. Sorry to hear that. Get well soon, my friend.
So but I'll get right to my point. I don't believe in polls, and the polls will show their true colors on the 28th. And as far as I compare this race as a horse race. There's only 2 horses in the race, and I think it's going to be a dead heat. And because they're both knocking each other. 6 months ago, the Liberals were so far behind they couldn't see daylight. So Carney comes along. He steals the thing from the PC guy about the carbon tax, and he was a hero right off the bat. That was the first thing he did when he got elected, or interim prime minister, whatever you want to call him.
Sure.
But his name was Mark Trudeau. He might as well not even run, because that's what people did. They turned against Trudeau and the Liberals, and it boosted up the PC fella. So to make a long story short, I don't believe in polls, and I'll believe when I see it on the 28th.
All right, you're waiting for the one poll that counts, as they say. Look, you rest up, get some chicken soup into you, get lots of rest, okay? Lots of liquids. I hope you feel better soon, Eric, okay? So we can hear from you. on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
The polls is the popular topic on Talkback today. Feel free to share your thoughts, how you think the polls compare with your own impressions of the election campaign so far. All the polling firms say it's the Liberals in the lead. Tom is in Toronto. Hello, Tom.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm good, Tom. Thanks for calling.
First time caller. I came across the show by accident because I wanted to get a feel for the rest of the country, and it was great to discover you.
Well, I really appreciate those kind words. Thank you so much. So on the polls, what are your thoughts here? What's going on?
Number one, I have a problem when polls don't have margin of errors, and I think most of these polls, if not all of them, don't show margin of error. So I don't know if they're using their own type of math or creative math or whatever, but fine. I'll take them for what they are. I find comfort that these polls come out, number one, before any debate has taken place, because I think that's when it matters for me. Once these debates take place and Pierre Poilievre has a one-on-one discussion with Carney, and then whatever people feel, that's where I stand as far as I'm concerned. But I got to tell you, I live in Toronto, okay, and I do my own polling in my head, just like one of your callers had mentioned, whether it's comments on local newspapers or whatever. When you talk to the average person here, the average is, if out of 10, you're lucky if you hit 2 or 3, because right now the Liberal Party is just toxic. We just have.
Now, when you say you're in Toronto, if I could just interrupt, I mean, are you like in area code 416? Old city of Toronto, really?
Midtown, right? Midtown, Eglinton,
because that is like the liberal heartland down there,
Well, it was, because you had an aging population that voted traditionally, red, didn't matter what they did. Now, I live right in the heartland, Marco Mendocino's area.
Sure.
And like I said, you talk to the average person, the Liberal Party is just toxic. In fact, we just had a provincial election here about a month and a half ago. Doug Ford overwhelmingly won. And the gentleman that ran as a Liberal in my riding he lost, and now he's running as a federal Liberal in my riding. It's like they couldn't find somebody, so they just shoved the same guy. And, and his signs are out there, including last month, where it says provincial Liberal team. So they don't even know if people are walking around going, is this guy running Liberal or federal or what?
Okay. Did that guy forget to take his signs down, or? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Just some people, some people just left them up. So the thing is, what you got to look at is the cost of living. If Pierre Poilievre can hamper that come these debates, the cost of living in the last 9 years has been harder for the average Canadian, and bring up the fact that the Liberal Party, Mr. Carney specifically, plans to reintroduce the carbon tax with what's called a carbon, I believe it was a carbon mechanism tariff, which a lot of people aren't familiar with.
But a border adjustment mechanism,
exactly. Which is basically going to get passed down to us. If he focuses on these two and show what his colors are, what Carney's true colors are, I think this is going to be a clean sweep. I mean, polls can either affect you negatively. Oh, yeah, because if your poll says, hey, this guy's ahead by 10 points, people are going to say, you know what, I'm going to stay home anyway because this guy's going to win if I'm a Liberal. So,
that's not what's being suggested right now. Tom, we'll see how it all plays out. As you say, 2.5 weeks to go. I think the debate story is going to be the news story of the election campaign next week, getting ready for the debates and prep and what you have to say and what not to say and how to look and how not to look and everything. And then it'll be, were there any knockout blows and da-da-da-da-da. Okay, thank you, Tom. Yeah, really interesting. And right in the heart of Toronto there. Okay. To Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia, Eric. Hello, Eric.
Hey, I'm good, Rob. Listen, what I find interesting is, first of all, I just want to talk about the stock market just for a minute. Are you familiar with a gentleman by the name of Mark Ross? Mark Moss, rather. Anyway, he's a financial guru. He has some very interesting takes. To make a long story short, he says the end game here is between the U.S. and China. China and the U.S. are facing off to see who has monetary control in the world. But he states that China is going for gold backing, and he states that the United States is going for Bitcoin, stablecoin, and cryptocurrency. And he says whoever wins this battle with the tariffs and so on and so forth will restructure the monetary system, and they're the people who control the monetary system, usually controls the economy of the world. It's very interesting. I recommend it to anybody to watch. Now, in terms of the polls, I conducted my own little poll here in Halifax, regular spots like the gas station, Tim Hortons. And stuff. I asked 11 people, 7 are conservative, 4 are liberal, and they're not they're not spring chickens anymore. So I found that interesting. And the last point I want to make is there's we hear a lot in the United States at one time the silent majority. I wonder if the same thing is happening here, Rob. If we have a silent majority that are actually conservative, looking at the fact that Carney was Trudeau's advisor, so suggested, for 5 years, and he has the same cabinet crew. I wonder if that has some kind of psychological effect on the voting psychic.
Okay. All very interesting. Thank you, Eric. Good stuff, as usual. Good to hear from you today. 1-833-668-2577, 1-833-668-2577. Polls, big topic of the day. We could talk about stocks as well. Tough day on the markets today. Once again, the big rally yesterday seems to have, one-day wonder. Stocks are down pretty hard right now. What is going on with that stock market? If you have any thoughts on that. Come on, let's go to Mark in Calgary. Hello, Mark.
Hey, Rob. How you doing?
Hi. Great, Mark. Thank you.
For the polls, my thoughts already. I totally believe it's bought and paid for by the left.
Bought and paid for by the left.
Yeah, but
okay.
I do want to. You had a caller earlier, Scott from Southwest Ontario, and he was saying it's a different game now. I don't believe it's a different game. I believe it's the same game with a different leader. Now, the reason I say that is because the cabinet, yes, it's smaller, but the key members that Trudeau had in his cabinet are still part of Carney's cabinet.
Right.
Which means you're still going to have the same policies and whatnot. So, to me, there's no change at all in what's happening. And I do know that Carney wants to increase the population of Canada to 100 million people over his term. Now, if that's true, that's going to be a huge.
No, it's not over. It's not over his term. It's not over his term. There was some kind of group that is by the end of the century, right? By the end of the century.
Yeah, but
by the year 2021. Sorry,
and even
2100.
So, though,
right.
Even so, that's going to be a detrimental hit to the economy of Canada, in my perspective.
Okay.
So,
okay.
It's all about the same policies as the Trudeau government. There's no change whatsoever.
Right.
I do think that Poilievre has a very, very strong point in making Canada.
Sure. But I want to circle back to what you said. You think the polls are bought and paid for by the left. Were the polls, was the left buying polls that had Poilievre up by 22, 23, 25 points? Was it the left buying those polls?
Here's why.
Or was it the right buying those polls?
Well, CBC, Poilievre announced that he was going to cut funding to CBC.
Yeah.
And that is where I seen a change in the poll numbers. Not when Carney came into office. It was when he said that. So if you could put that together. CBC,
well, I don't know. He's been saying that for 2 years, though. He's been saying that for 2 years. He was saying that, defund the CBC was one of the biggest crowd pleasers at his rallies, long before the election was called.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Everybody knows the mainstream media is controlled by the Liberals. That's what gives them good numbers in the polls. Everybody knows that.
Okay. I must be the last to know.
That's all I wanted to say.
All right, Mark. I must be the last to know. Just working for one of the big, media companies. Okay, look, Stephen, I'm not going to bring you on right now because you'd only have 30 seconds. I want to give you more time. And that's it for hour number 1 of Talkback. We will stop here.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
So we threw out 2 topics. One has proven to be much more popular than the other. The first one that's been really popular is the polls. because we're halfway through this federal election campaign. All the polls give the lead to the Liberals, every single one of them. And we're just asking, what do you think of those polls? How do the polls compare with your own impression of the election campaign so far? Second topic, less popular, but still open to hearing comments on it, just the stock market. Donald Trump and the stock market. There are accusations Trump and his people might be manipulating the stock market. Democrats in the United States calling for an investigation about insider trading, as a matter of fact. 1-833-668-2577. Now, David hosts the Big Story podcast from time to time, which you can hear on the Seeker app. If you download the Seeker app, Big Story podcast. And recently you've interviewed a couple of well-known posters, David Coletto from Abacus Data and from Ipsos, Daryl Bricker, right?
That's right, yeah.
Right. So to Mark's point, just before the news, we spoke with Mark from Calgary. Said, I think the polls are bought and paid for. Bought by the left is what he said. They're bought by the left.
Yeah.
Now, when you were interviewing Daryl Bricker from Ipsos, he was talking about, like who pays for polls. There are rules about who pays for polls and what has to be disclosed about who's paying for polls. Am I right?
You are absolutely correct. Yes.
Okay. All right. Explain a little bit, Dave.
Well,
if you don't mind.
During the course of an election, for any election or political polling of any kind, there's a section of the Canada Elections Act which governs how pollsters present their findings. And I'll let Daryl Bricker, in his own words, explain that.
And the reason for that is because we believe in participating in the political process, the democratic process, and doing accurate polls is a good way of supporting democracy in any country. So we feel it's part of our responsibility to do that. It doesn't hurt in terms of building our brand and brand awareness, but also it's a mission that we have at Ipsos. So we don't just do it in Canada; we do it all over the world. And you're also obligated, if you are accepting money from a corporation to do a political poll, you're obligated under the Canada's Elections Act to reveal that.
Oh, okay. So you do have to disclose that if it's
yeah. I would say
entity.
Everybody who's interested in knowing challenging pollsters, there is an act. It's called, the Canada Election Act. You can go look at it. There's a whole section on what the obligations of pollsters in the media who report their polls are, what those obligations are. And if they're not living up to them, then feel that you can write either to Elections Canada, or there's an association for pollsters called CRIC, C-R-I-C, where you can also write and register a complaint if you have an issue.
Okay. That's very interesting. I'm glad we could get that out there. Thank you, David. Let's go to who's up next here. Paul in Cambridge, I believe, is up next. Hi, Paul.
Hi, how you doing today?
Good, Paul. Thank you.
I'm pretty sure you know my thoughts on polls, but I just like to say something here. I'm on one of these research panels. I get regular emails. Dear member of the insert name here research panel. I get these all the time. Dear participant, dear member, all these from a polling company that I don't exactly agree with, but they send me out all these polls. But the funny thing is, they have never sent me or contacted me for a political poll. Now, could that be because they already know what my leanings are? Are they filtering who they're sending these polls out to? This is where I question things. My personal thoughts, and doing other polls, outside of political polls, a lot of them are marketing research. Right. Might as well just say these polling companies are marketing companies. They're looking to figure out how you best sell your product to an individual. Sure. And of course, then you get the likes of Frank Graves. He's made that pretty clear what he's doing.
Yeah, you always point that one out.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
and he's damaged his own credibility with that tweet.
Yeah, but he's always included in the overall polls and the 338 and everything else. His numbers are in there. That's one that we know about. But what about the leanings of all these other, like Nick Nanos polls? Anytime I've seen him interviewed on TV, he definitely appears to be leaning towards the Liberals.
I don't know. I mean, I think recently when he's been on television, what he's been questioning is, well, first of all, recently he's been saying the race is narrowed, and that he has described the Liberal support as being fragile, that it's not as firmly committed as the Conservative support.
And the left are just losing it online, like on social media and whatnot.
Right.
They're constantly posting the ones that support them and not so much as the ones that don't. And like I say, 338, one would hope that, taking an aggregate of all the different polls, it would come out a little bit more accurate, but that can still be skewed in ways. So I don't have a whole lot of faith.
Why would you do that? But why would you do that? Why would you sacrifice your credibility? Like if 338 was doing that, fudging the numbers, then who would go to 338? Nobody would trust it.
Okay, so I'm watching a particular news channel, and the one announcer, the joy on his face when he announces that the Liberals are ahead, it's obvious he's biased. And now that same news agency, what they refer to as mainstream media, and I'm not painting everybody with the same brush, but the look of joy on his face, and of course, they also sponsor polls.
Okay. Maybe some people have their own personal biases. I don't know. I'm pretty, I'm pretty upfront about my own. I don't hide my own. I don't hide my own political leanings. People know kind of where I stand, right? But I'm also not, I'm also not a journalist, and I'm also not a pollster. I'm just a guy who likes to ask questions. All right, got to run, Paul. Thank you. Got to run. Very busy today. Jason in Kitchener is up next here on hour number 2 of Talkback. You want to talk about the polls, Jason?
Yes, sir. I do worry that there could be some truth to them. I don't see it, but it's I'm getting flashbacks of Dalton McGuinty, who ran the party into the Ontario Liberals into the ground like Justin Trudeau, and then they whitewashed the barn and sold it to us as the new house with Kathleen Wynne, who said, "Hold my beer and watch this," and destroyed Ontario for another 4 years before they became lost party status. I worry that's going to happen again. The only thing that, like the crowd size thing, though, like I think where that does stand out is that means people are willing to wait in line. They're willing to spend hours doing this. So they are going to go to the polls, where I think a lot of people polled, they're like, I don't really like Poilievre. He's too much like Trump. I would vote for Carney, but they don't really care to vote for Carney, so they probably won't show up on that day. That's what I'm hoping for.
Well, it is interesting, your comparison to the Liberals in Ontario during those Liberal days. I remember Ontario was governed by the Liberal for 15 years, right? Dalton McGuinty, 3 elections, then Kathleen Wynne won the election. I mean, Dalton McGuinty's time was over. He was so unpopular. He had teachers picketing outside, his events, right, who he had tried to woo for so long. And once they turned on him, he decided to call it a day. Kathleen Wynne won the leadership, and that Liberal Party was able to say, you want change? Because there was a big appetite for change. You want change? Look, we've changed. We have a new leader, right? Dalton's gone. You're sick of Dalton? Dalton's gone. We've got a new leader now, Kathleen Wynne, and it worked for them. Not only did they win, they won a majority government.
Yeah, and Carney right now, he was the advisor for Trudeau. He's the one that wanted the carbon tax, but now he's whitewashing the barn and telling us it's a brand new house he's selling us because he knows it's not popular and he's not going to win. But he's going to put something else in if it's not a carbon tax.
Okay.
He's going to put something on the company, so we're going to pay it anyways.
Okay. So, but you're worried about the polls, right? You're worried about them.
I am a little concerned. I'd like to think they're wrong, but I've seen this happen before, and it's got me nervous. And then
got you nervous. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, Jason in Kitchener, for calling. Stephen in Calgary up next. Stephen. Hello, Stephen.
Hi.
Hi, Stephen.
How you doing?
Good.
Myself, I don't have a problem with the polls. My concern is, like the last gentleman said, whitewash the barn and resell it. It's like, look, here, we brought out something shiny. Isn't it wonderful? And I think as Canadians, we don't even seem to understand our own economy. I don't put myself down as an economist, but I've looked at some of the data on the internet regarding our economy, and what I found out was that 93% of all the cars made in Canada are sold in the United States. And I remember a number of years back when the Canadian dollar went way up, and it was around $1.15 to $1.20 in value compared to the American, and how the people in Ontario were crying out, "We can't do this. We're losing our ability to
hurting the export market." Okay, I don't remember the dollar being that strong. It was approaching parity at one time during the Harper years, but
I guarantee you, it was up. It was up around $1.15 to $1.20. It didn't stay there overly long, but when it was up there, they were screaming in Ontario, because basically what that was is we were creating our own tariff. That we were increasing the cost of our vehicles and auto parts, and so the government moved quickly to bring the dollar back down, because otherwise it would have just crushed the Ontario auto industry.
Okay,
so they had to move, and I don't have a problem with that.
Okay,
but what I have a problem with is that. A number of years back, Stephen Harper said we have to break this mentality that we can just deal with the United States. We have to reach out to other countries, and it was closed down. It didn't go anywhere, and people accused him of all kinds of stuff. And we lost an opportunity. Instead of moving forward in that with that initiative, for the last 15 or so years, we've sat still and done nothing.
Okay. Well, we do have it was started under Harper. It was finished under the Liberals. We do have a free trade agreement with the EU. You realize that, right? We don't have a free trade agreement with the UK because the UK left the EU.
All the trade agreements you want. If you're not, like the way the Japanese and the Chinese do, if you're not actually involving your government to get out and be involved and to make specific trade deals and work hand in hand with big business, then this kind of initiatives is it's just not enough. We're not in a playground where everything's done fairly. You have to play by the rules that are being played in that playground, and we don't. We've sat back and we've depended on the United States to bolster our economy, and they've now said, no, we're not going to do that for you anymore. And we're saying, well, you're bad people. I mean, I look at it and go, well, if my neighbor was building 100 cars and I had to buy 93 of them in order to bolster their economy, why would I want to do that?
Okay, that's an interesting way to look at it.
The other thing is, we had an opportunity to take and develop in Western Canada, in Saskatchewan, in Alberta, and in British Columbia, a huge natural gas oil industry that would have been independent of any one other country. We would have generated huge sums of money, independent of having to sell the vast majority of it
captive to the United States. Yeah.
And what did we do? We said, oh no, we're not going to do that. Now, I can understand the people of Eastern Canada, and they're wanting to hold on to their jobs, and they're wanting to have a dollar at a set value, and they're wanting to have all these things that they want. But what they're forgetting is it's a dependent economy that they're trying to hold on to. It's not an independent economy that we were looking to build in the West.
Okay,
but the vast majority of the people are in the East, and so they want to build that economy, and they want to somehow try to make the Americans accept that that's the way things are going to be. You can't force it on the Americans.
Gotcha. We got to run. We're a little tight on time. Thank you, though. Very, very interesting points, Stephen, that you raised today. Sean in Halifax, very patient today. Sean, thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, I'd like to talk about the polls and why I feel like they're just so far off. Here in Nova Scotia, we just had a provincial election, as you know, with Tim Houston. But going back prior to when he was first elected back in 21, I believe it was. I remember at the time he was running against Ian Rankin, and all the polls down here were showing that they were neck and neck, or some had even Ian Rankin up a few points. But mostly across the board of all the stations, they were running pretty equal. Come the election, Tim Houston actually ended up winning by 13 points. Not one poll had that showing, right? So I found that extremely, that was when I first was like, wait a second, these polls were way off. Like they were off 10%, 10 points, right? Like it was bad. So,
all right.
So then fast forward to our last election back just a month or so ago, 2 months ago.
Yeah.
The polls, not one poll down here showed the Liberals losing seats or gaining. Some had them gaining, but
right.
They had 14.
Well, the Liberals got wiped out. I mean, pretty much wiped out, right? Well, they win 3 seats.
Yeah, like that's what I
something
mean.
like that.
They went from like not one poll showed that they I think the lowest I seen was them coming down to 12 seats. And then the highest I seen them on a poll was coming up to like 20 seats, 18, 19 seats. And they finished with 2 seats.
2 seats,
54 seats.
Right.
We have 54 seats here in Nova Scotia in a provincial. And they finished with 2 seats, Rob. And the NDP finished with 9. Right. And so the NDP actually went up 3 seats. The Liberals came down 12 seats because they had 14. They came down 12 seats. The NDP gained 3 seats of that 12, but then the other 9 went to the Conservatives. Right. And then the popular vote, the polls had the popular vote kind of all over the place, like close, but not close. The end of the popular vote, it ended, Tim Houston got 187,000 votes. The NDP got 70,000, 79,000, and the Liberals got about 79,000. So like they were blown out of the wall. Like just so when I look at the polls and then I look at the maps, like if you take our general election map from 2025 and look at the overview, and it's blue across the whole board.
Right,
but
it's
if
blue.
You go down to that, but if you look at the central area, like of HRM, so our Halifax municipality, our main city, that's where the Liberals hold the seats. The Liberals and NDP, right? So if you were to poll Nova Scotia and you call downtown or people in Halifax, chances are you're going to get a liberal leaning poll. So it just like when I look at the polls and then of course the election down south that we just watched happen with their polls. So it just seems like but Nova Scotia, our polls were so dramatically off that not one had them losing 10.
And as you wondering. Yeah, fair enough. Okay. All right. Thank you, Sean. Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, that's interesting analysis. Kyle in Listowel. Kyle. Hi, Kyle.
Hello.
I'm good. Thank you.
First of all, that Mark Carney sounds like Trump, but that's besides the point. I don't think
Mark Carney sounds like Trump?
Yep.
Why do you say Mark Carney sounds like Trump?
Have you seen his interviews? He's just as condescending as Trump. Some of his interviews that he does with the press and stuff. And they're both liberal. I mean, like, come on, they love each other. They're both liberal. But I think the polls don't matter anyways because we haven't even had a leaders debate yet. And the only poll that matters is our federal election. I mean, I think we should stop getting caught up about all these polls that are happening right now until people actually hit the polls and actually cast their ballot. That's when we'll really find out. But we haven't had a federal leadership debate yet. And I think that's when you're going to start seeing some shifting then, because right now they're just campaigning and stuff, and they're saying what you want to hear, but it'd be nice to see them actually go after each other face to face and see what happens. So that's all I got to say there, Rob. Thanks very much.
All right, Kyle. Thank you. Some free lines available there. 1-833-668-2577. Lots of time to fit you in before the top of the hour. Kevin in Vancouver, calling from Vancouver today. Hi, Kevin.
Hello. How you doing?
I'm good, Kevin. How's Vancouver?
It's not raining, which is great.
Okay.
It's been raining for a while. I just wanted to talk about the stock market.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Trump is absolutely manipulating it, and it's not the first time. The cryptocurrency he made, market manipulation, that was just total bribery. It was like, okay, anyone who wants to give me dark money so that you can pay me off so I can do anything that benefits your business and then it's untraceable because it's a cryptocurrency, there you go, right? His social media, it's all there he's just like every other rich person. It's just about money for him. That's it.
Okay. So with the crypto, I think they call it in crypto, they call it a rug pull. like like a kind of a pump and dump. So you think this is kind of maybe a repeat of that, like a pump and dump scheme?
Well, like it doesn't even have to be a pump and dump necessarily for it to be just like a get rich quick scheme, right?
Right.
Because there doesn't necessarily have to be a dump, right? But I mean, that was what happened here. So, and absolutely that's what it's doing with the stock market. That tweet was obvious, right? Anyone who expects any honest intention out of Trump is completely misguided.
Okay.
Any Canadian should be able to see that.
So when I ask, do you think Trump and his people are manipulating the stock market? You're like a 10 out of 10 on that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Interesting, Kevin. Thank you for your call. Good to hear from you today. First time caller out there in Vancouver.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Boyd in Calgary is up next on Talkback.
Hello.
Hi, Boyd.
Yes, actually, you got my name reversed. It's Glenn Boyd, but okay.
Okay, Glenn.
Three things.
Yeah.
The guy who was talking about the exchange rate being high, for about 30 years, we were 10 cents above the Americans on the average, so it went up and down a bit. I don't recall it ever going to 15, though. 12 was the highest I recall.
Okay.
Okay. The polls, even when they give them, they say there's a minimum of up to 3% variation. They don't claim they're accurate.
Yeah, 19 times out of 20.
Why does everybody argue about them not being accurate?
Yeah, 19 times out of 20. But it's about the trend as well, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Now, the third item is there was a law passed in what was the colonies back in the 1800s that said only a member of the colony, only a citizen, could run for an election, and nobody who is multi-citizen could run. I can find nowhere where that's ever been repealed. So how do we have a person with 3 citizenships?
Okay, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer.
I'm just raising that point.
Okay.
That's all I wanted to say today.
Well, and you have said it, Glenn. Thank you. Okay, good to hear from you. Diane in Red Deer. Hello, Diane.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
I'm a first-time caller.
Well, I appreciate that. Lots of you today. Lots of newbies today. Great to hear from you.
Well, you know what, Rob? I have listened for a very long time. I quite enjoy your show.
Thank you.
But I did want to say that I do agree that the polls are probably somewhat correct. However, I think that probably it's the older generations that's answering their phone.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people that are working will not answer their phone. And I also believe that the NDP numbers went way down and the Liberal numbers went way up. And I think it was more of a moving of NDP voters and Bloc voters, et cetera, moved to the Liberal Party because they're more to the left.
Right. I guess when I look at these polls, and people, questioning the polls, wondering what's happening with the Conservatives, I wonder how much of it has to do with the Conservatives at all, why the Liberals would be in the lead. I mean, on the low side, the Conservatives are at like 36. On the high side, they're still at 40. Like 40 used to be the magic number. 40, if you're 40 in the polls, you're going to get a majority government. I bet you if I told Pierre Poilievre and his campaign manager, Jenny Byrne, halfway through the election, you're going to be at 40 points in the polls, they'd be thrilled with that number. That's better than what Stephen Harper got back in 2011 when he won his only majority government. But gosh, it's the collapse of the NDP and the erosion of support for the Bloc in Quebec is really, really helping the Liberals. It's not like the Liberals, I think, are running a great campaign.
No, I don't. I don't think they are either. And I really believe it's just the Liberals got so left that the NDP people and the Bloc people are just looking at Carney as a shiny new item, and he's got this resume, and they think he's just wonderful, although I do not. But they see it that way, and they lean left, and I think that's why they've gone to the Liberals and not a whole lot have come to the Conservatives. And I also believe there might be a slight bit of change in the Conservatives as well, because there are some Conservatives that are kind of maybe soft.
I mean, they're not at 45 anymore. They're not at 45. Yeah. Some of them had them at 47. So they're not there.
But I didn't believe those really high numbers either. I think people were just so upset with Trudeau that they were just saying anything but Trudeau.
Right.
Sort of at that point. And polls could have been, pretty correct there. But I think there's a lot with social media too. I think there's a lot of people that are answering the phone that might not be indicative of the general population, because so many people are on social media nowadays. And I think that's, they're not answering their phones. They're not interested in that. And so you're getting a lot of the older generation, I think, mostly answering the phones. I mean, that could be part of it. I don't know.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you. Great to hear from you today. Really appreciate the call. I mean, it's as much a story of, NDP. NDP. I mean, one of these polls has them at 5%. Main Street has the NDP at 5%. I've never seen a number like that for the New Democrats. There are a lot of NDP voters who can't stand the thought of Pierre Poilievre as prime minister, but they can somehow stomach the thought of Mark Carney, Wall Street banker, central banker, Mr. Bay Street, Wall Street, tax haven. Do you have any Grey Poupon money bags? They could somehow stomach him over Pierre Poilievre as prime minister, and they've switched. And the Bloc, which had been riding high, I mean, now it's looking cooked in Quebec. Most of the support from the Bloc seems to have bled to the Liberals as well, because the sovereigntists are all for sovereignty until they want the Canadian government to make sure Quebecers are taken care of because of any economic harm from the United States. It's like peak Quebec. So like a stampede from the Bloc to the Liberals all of a sudden. I don't know if the Conservatives have run a terrible campaign. I know that there are some high-profile Conservatives who are saying they've blown it. But I notice even Lawrence Martin is making the case in the Globe and Mail today, and that's a guy who never writes anything nice about the Conservatives or Poilievre. He's saying the Conservatives haven't run a bad campaign, and the Liberals aren't running a superior campaign. It's just factors. Events, my boy, events. We'll be right back. Connor in Markdale. Connor. Hello, Connor.
Hi, Rob. How you doing today?
I'm good, Connor. Thanks. How you doing?
Oh, I'm not too bad.
That's good. That's good.
Looking at all this, and I'm hoping the polls are wrong, and I have a feeling that they are.
Okay. Why is that?
I have a bit of a theory on it. I'd love to hear it. On the fact that, just like your previous caller there mentioning, that most of the people that would be responding to the polls would be people that are in their elder years and have the time in a day to do that. I am a Conservative supporter. I'm not necessarily a Poilievre supporter. But I believe that the vast majority of Poilievre's voters, with the way he set up his campaign with the boots, not suits going and all that, we're at work 10, 12, 13 hours a day.
Right.
I have never gotten a call from a polling company after 4 p.m.
Okay.
So, like, the vast majority of us...
They're not reaching you, you're saying, right?
That's exactly what I'm saying, is they're not reaching all of the audiences. They need to expand their times they're working, essentially. And they also need to get rid of that phone call that's a recording that tries to convince you off the start that it's not a recording. I've gotten 3 companies called me, and I've got that voicemail.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Where it goes, oh, hello, and then there's a pause, and you go, oh, hello, and then all of a sudden it's so-and-so from Access Research or whoever, right?
Okay.
And, you get all that kind of stuff. To be completely honest, most of the guys that are in the blue-collar world, we hang up. We do not have time. We're out there working 10.
Yeah, everybody's busy. Everybody's busy.
Exactly. Everybody is, but those that typically work the most are the blue-collar world, and that is the vast majority of Poilievre supporters, I believe.
Okay. Well, we'll see in 2.5 weeks. It'll all be over. Then we'll see who's right. The pollsters or the doubters. So. Okay.
So.
Yeah. Thank you. Good to hear from you. Thank you for all your calls. I mean, sometimes the polls don't get it right. There are examples, even in recent political history, of the polls just being wrong. Just ask J.N. Seltzer. Not even in the polling business anymore. One of the most respected pollsters in the United States. She was the Iowa poll, right? Des Moines Register. She was called the Queen of Polling. And 3 days before the U.S. presidential election, her poll came out. Kamala Harris up by 3 points over Donald Trump in Iowa because of older women breaking for the Democrats. And people were thinking, well, Trump is cooked. If Harris can win Iowa, she'll win everywhere. And she could certainly win the swing states. And what happened on election night? The poll was off by 16 points. 16 points. So it happens. Even to pollsters of great repute, happened to the Queen of Polling. And I mean, who will ever forget the New York Times poll tracker back in 2016 when it was Trump versus Hillary, right? They were running headlines, is the election over? And then the famous one, Hillary Clinton has a 91% chance to win the election. Hillary Clinton, 91% chance to win the election. It was the New York Times, all the news that's fit to print. And, you know, we all know what happened. I was as shocked as anyone when it did happen. I didn't see it coming, so did a lot of pollsters miss that. Two very well-known examples. And look, some people think the same thing could be happening here. I don't know if that's the case. 2.5 weeks to go. I do know that. And it's going to be an interesting 2.5 weeks. The debates next week. We're back tomorrow, Friday, free-for-all Talkback Hour tomorrow. That's always a lot of fun. Hope you'll join in the conversation then. Until then, the latest breaking news coming up next on News Radio.